Hi guys, today we're going to talk about fluctuating caloric intake from training days to non-training days. So previously I've actually posted a video where my preferences have changed since I've done that video. So it's probably about a year ago, and I was a big fan of kind of fluctuating mainly carbohydrate intake and total calories from a training day compared to a non-training day. But the reality is, just say for instance your goal is fat loss, is more about creating that net caloric deficit at the end of the week. So regardless of the small fluctuations from increased calories burned on training days to non-training days, it's better just to look at it over a week. So therefore, by making changes to calories on a daily basis can sometimes just make it more complicated than it needs to be, especially if you're working with kind of intermediate type of clients where having two different calorie intakes can be confusing. And I know there's some coaches that have kind of completely different to that, and they have like 2 to 3 different types of calorie intakes. They'll have like a high day, a low day, a medium day, and there's varying degrees of those within the week. As always, it depends. So a good example where it would certainly be a very good idea to fluctuate calorie intake from training day to a non-training day would be an endurance training. Just say if they're a marathon training, they train twice a day one day and then they have a rest day next, the amount of calories they'll be expending on that training day would be significantly greater than the non-training day. So therefore, fluctuating total calories, carbohydrates, in my opinion, would be very useful for that individual. However, a typical kind of strength trainee looking to improve body composition, which is probably the majority of people watching this, fluctuating from a training day to a non-training day, like I said, it's just not necessary, and quite often it makes it more complicated than it needs to be, because like I said, it's more about trying to create that net deficit over the week, over the period of forthcoming weeks, etc., to achieve your goal. And the same applies for hypertrophy. It's just trying to take that net surplus over the week. So by having kind of bigger jumps from training day to non-training day, it's an overcomplication. However, it's important to take preference into account. You'll have some individuals that just tend to prefer to have higher carbohydrates, higher calories on training days. Maybe they perform better. Or even perhaps if you've got an individual having a very high caloric intake, and sometimes you just quite difficult to consume that many calories on a non-training day just because they're not quite as hungry. So that's an important kind of change there. Say if you've got an individual having a high caloric intake, their goal is hypertrophy, and they're really struggling to meet that caloric intake on their non-training day, it may be better to bump it up on the training day and therefore still keep that net surplus at the end of the week. Like I said, very important. Another consideration would be refeed days, and there's a big difference between having kind of a high, medium, low day and then a high carbohydrate refeed when it's needed, because I see quite a few coaches when they have almost these random fluctuating days. They're just random, they're not used when required. So when I have a refeed implement for a client or for myself, it's when it's required. So maybe we've hit a stall in fat loss, perhaps their training performance has dropped, perhaps they're feeling more tired, more lethargic, etc. So that day is almost added when required, but it's not kind of our staple foundation of the week. It's just added, like I said, when it's needed. So conclusions and applications. So if your goal is kind of muscle growth or fat loss, it's more about the net difference at the end of the week. So obviously for fat loss, you're trying to create that net caloric deficit. Hypertrophy, that net caloric surplus at the end of the week. So by changing your carbohydrate calorie intake for non-training days and training days, can just overcomplicate things. However, endurance training will be a good example where the amount of calories expended from the training day to the non-training day is so great you just cannot ignore keeping the same caloric intake. It really would be worth bumping up on those days. As mentioned previously, the other thing is just preference. If you do tend to prefer kind of fluctuating your total calories, your total carb intake from training day to non-training, there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you realise it's more about that net difference at the end of the week, the preceding weeks. That's the most important factor. Please like the video if you've liked it, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Have a good day. Thank you very much.